Hello there, and welcome back to the channel. Mad Mike here, and today we're going to be going over the news that James Gunn has been hired back on to direct Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 at Disney after his firing last July. Now, before we dive into that, I'd like to do another plug for the book Hero. It is a comic book currently on Indiegogo. I will leave the link in the description. It's mainly aimed at a younger audience, so if you have a child, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, or somebody in your life that has children, and you think that they like to read comic books or something like that, then pick them up a copy. That's well worth your time and well worth your money. Now, moving on from that, we're going to move right into this thing. So Disney announced today that they were rehiring James Gunn to direct Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. And first, I'm just going to say this. My personal opinion is that I think this was not a good move for them. I think it's going to cause a lot of negative PR. And that's my personal opinion. I will go over an objective opinion of this in a second. But that's my opinion. But now just the facts of the matter before I get into the objectivity of it is that Gunn, after he was let go in July due to several tweets being unearthed from the past involving several incidents, basically some kind of edgy jokes about pedophilia, and then not long after that followed some images of him at what was described as an age play party, which is basically a party where generally the men go dressed up in suits and stuff, and the women go dressed as little schoolgirls or young girls. There's nothing illegal about it. It is just very cringy. But he was let go after all of these things came out, and then he proceeded to sign with Warner Brothers, and he is currently signed on to write and direct their sequel/soft reboot to Suicide Squad. Now, here's the thing about this whole situation is that there was a lot of backlash from the Hollywood crowd when James Gunn was let go. Dave Bautista proceeded to go on a psychotic rant on social media for weeks and weeks and weeks after the firing. And several members of the Guardians of the Galaxy cast, including Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Dave Bautista, and Bradley Cooper, all signed a letter to Disney saying that they would like James Gunn to be reinstated. Now, it is worth noting that James Gunn did issue an apology for these tweets, and they were from many years ago. And I will say this, that I've criticized people, similar to the Kevin Hart thing, where they drudge up things from 5, 10, 15 years ago. But here's the thing that these people need to kind of remember is that if you're going to treat one side this one way and treat other people from the other side a different way, that is not fair. And I'm going to bring up the Roseanne thing because here's the problem with what Disney is doing now, is that they made the right decision initially to let him go. Now, I like James Gunn as a director. I like a majority of his work. I like Slither. I like the first Guardians. Super is a really weird movie, but it's kind of entertaining in a creepy way. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was okay, even though I didn't really love it that much. And I would have preferred them to maybe get Taika Waititi or somebody to do Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 in his absence. But Waititi turned it down, and it appears that Disney was not able to get anybody to replace him. And I'm going to say what this seems like afterwards, but let me just get through this first part, is that Roseanne made inflammatory tweets about somebody comparing somebody who was of African American descent to a primate. Now, that is horrible. It should not be tolerated. And I think Disney was right to release her on a PR basis because it would have been a PR nightmare if they had kept her. And I get that. And she came up with the excuse like, okay, I was on Ambien or this stuff, this and that. And there have been people that have come out that said, oh, they sleepwalk or they do weird things on Ambien. Okay, I get that. She also issued an apology, and she stated that it was not meant to be a racial comment because she did not know that the woman in question was African American. Now, moving past that, you have the James Gunn situation. Now, the James Gunn situation involved tweets that were brought up from his past, and people will say it's from conservative people, whatever. It doesn't matter who it's from. Were basically just edgy boy tweets for the most part. They were just these weird jokes about, basically pedophilia jokes. And they were very cringy. They were very weird. But there were two that kind of stood out, and one of them was a tweet that involved him tagging somebody who he was working with, tagging another Twitter account that he was working with, this young girl who was 13, and he was tagging her in this tweet that said some very obscene things, and you can look up the tweet if you would like. The other one is his association with I believe it is the director of, or the former director of Jeepers Creepers, who was caught, I believe, with child pornography on his computer or something along those lines. He is a registered sex offender now. But those two were really the things that, like, okay, that kind of sealed the deal, and I'm surprised they didn't let him go immediately after that. And then it just piled on when somebody who had, obviously whoever had reported the tweets initially, had the pictures of the age play party, which they posted onto YouTube and various social media, or just social media in general, and sent them out to media outlets. And that was the last straw. Marvel let him go. Now, I don't disagree with Marvel letting him go, because they let him go. Even though he apologized for the tweets. He apologized for all the weird stuff. He's just like, look, I was involved in some kind of edgy boy social circles back then, and those are just kind of the way that we talk to each other. Look, I get it. If you talk to each other in private, we all talk to people in private differently than what we would talk to people in public. We get that. You talk to your friends different than you would talk to a complete stranger. But at the same time, you also have to realize you are a public figure. And, people didn't realize that James Gunn was going to blow up and become a huge Marvel director when he did Guardians of the Galaxy and all that stuff. I think the biggest thing he had done up to that point was, might have been Slither, although I can't remember exactly. I'll have to look up his filmography after this. But obviously he didn't expect that. But here's the thing: is like he made a mistake. He put out the dates that he was trying to erase from his Twitter account, and there were if he had erased those, there would have just been a question of what did he erase, and yada yada yada. There really wouldn't have been too big. I don't think it would have been too big of a deal, except that he accidentally posted the dates that he was going to be erasing, and that immediately triggered all sorts of people to look through his Twitter feeds, or his old Twitter feeds, and try and find tweets that he was trying to erase so they could put them back and archive them. And that led to all of these strange pedophilia joke tweets, and the other two specific ones that I mentioned, about the 13-year-old actress that he was working with, and about the director from Jeepers Creepers. And those then came to light because he was a dumbass. Now, Roseanne was also a dumbass, and she got the same punishment as him. And I feel that those punishments were appropriate because, look, James Gunn, we all knew somebody was going to pick him up as soon as Marvel let him go. We knew it. And I'm not surprised it was Warner Brothers, and I'm not surprised that Suicide Squad was the film that he was chosen to work on. So, he wasn't going to miss work. Let's put it that way. It wasn't something that was going to hurt his career indefinitely. And I don't remember how long it was after he actually got fired from Marvel that he was picked up by Warner Brothers, but it wasn't that long. And then you look back at Roseanne and, like, look, it's the same exact circumstance. The only difference is the time frame in which we're talking about the tweets. Because the tweets that Roseanne put out were recent, as opposed to James Gunn's, which were dug up from, I think, 5 or 6 years ago. But if you want to look at another situation that's very similar to that, you can look at Kevin Hart. And here's the thing. Nobody came out and said about James Gunn, they said, oh, he's publishing all these tweets. It's horrible. It's horrible. It's insensitive to people that have been abused as children and stuff like that. No, you didn't hear any of the Hollywood people come out about that. But Kevin Hart has a few jokes about gay people, and suddenly everybody's losing their minds. You don't get to pick and choose what gets somebody fired. There is a baseline. And if you don't follow the baseline, then you have to establish it somewhere. And if you're going to establish that racist and sexist things, or what you perceive to be them, are grounds for firings or removals, then you can't just say, oh, well, we don't care about pedophilia just because it's something that, apparently has been going on in Hollywood for a very long time. We've all heard about the stories that Corey Feldman tells about the 80s, or him and Corey Haim, and a bunch of other like weird stuff about child actors, all the allegations against Bryan Singer, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Now look, this is just something that it fits their narrative. It fits the elitist Hollywood narrative of they don't really care about crimes against children. They don't, unless it's something to do with like refugees or something. But they don't care about crimes against children. They care about racism and sexism, and they just cut the other thing out. You're not going to be able to get away with that. And the reason why James Gunn was rehired is because none of the Hollywood people that Disney approached were willing to take that job. Because they wanted James Gunn to come back. And they weren't willing to take the job and take over that franchise simply because they did not agree with his firing and they wanted him to come back. Now look, it's a contract basis. It is something that you can't really, because it's a contract basis, it's not like you can just hire a scab and have them do it. It's not that kind of a deal. You have to sign somebody onto a contract, and the other thing is the actors were very against it, especially Dave Bautista. And really, the only thing that Disney kind of gave into them on up until this point was that they were going to use James Gunn's original draft of the script, maybe do a few rewrites here and there, and then they would make the film with a new director. Now, I personally think this is a bad move by Disney. And I think this is going to cause a lot of controversy around Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Whenever that does decide to come out. I don't think that this is going to, especially if it keeps getting brought up, if you have guys like Dave Bautista rubbing this in people's faces that wanted him gone. If you have, stuff by the actors that are trolling the people that wanted him gone, this is going to draw up a bunch of media attention, and not in a good way. And I think that's very possible that could happen. Now, moving past that, we're going to get Guardians 3 no matter what. I'm kind of willing to separate the artist from the art in this scenario. I will judge the film on its merits alone. I did not care that much for Volume 2. I thought the humor outweighed the action, and some of the humor did not hit very well, and it made itself a bit too silly. People can say that I have the opposite effect on Ragnarok, where it should have been more serious, but in terms of Guardians of the Galaxy, the first film had almost a perfect balance between action and comedy, and it all made sense. And it made sense for that world. But they led more with the comedy in Volume 2, and it kind of messed up that balance. So I want to see if they're going to do a Volume 3, are they going to be able to right that ship? And the other thing is, apparently he is not going to be directing Volume 3 until he is done with Suicide Squad. So that means Volume 3 is probably going to, I'd assume it would get moved back to maybe 2021 or 2022, something like that for a release. But again, we'll know more later. What do you think about this? Are you glad that he's rehired? Do you not like the idea? Do you think this is a mistake by Disney? Leave a like on the video, hit the bell for notifications, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?